You are not losing people because you are boring. You are losing people because, without realizing it, you are becoming psychologically expensive to be close to. And if that sentence stings a little, good, because it explains something you have probably felt but never had language for. They do not leave with a slam of the door. They fade, they thin out, their replies get slower, their energy gets quieter, and you are left replaying every conversation like there is a hidden mistake you missed. Quick thing before I go deeper. We are building toward our next subscriber milestone, and your subscription genuinely helps this channel reach people who actually want substance, not recycled advice. And if this hits a nerve in a useful way, tap like too. It tells the algorithm this is worth showing to someone who is confused in the exact same way. Now, let me frame this in a way most people do not. When people drift away, you assume it is about affection, like they liked you less, or you did something wrong, or they found someone better, sometimes sure. But in a huge number of cases, the real driver is not emotional preference. It is cost management. Human relationships run on an invisible budget. Attention, emotional regulation, time, status risk, obligation, guilt, and cognitive load. Every interaction with you has a price tag, and most of that price tag has nothing to do with whether you are a good person. It has to do with how much your presence forces them to become a different version of themselves. Here is what is actually happening. People do not drift away from you when they stop caring. They drift away when the relationship stops being metabolizable, when it becomes harder to digest than it is to avoid. Think about that for a second. Metabolizable, like food. Your body does not reject food because it hates it. It rejects food because it cannot process it without pain. Social systems are similar. If being around you repeatedly triggers shame, comparison, responsibility, performance, conflict avoidance, or emotional labor, their nervous system starts treating you as an expense. Not a person. An expense. And that leads to the first deeper mechanism most people never track. The drift is often not about you as an individual. It is about the role you accidentally assign them. Every relationship contains an implicit job description. Who initiates, who listens, who fixes, who reassures, who is the funny one, who is the stable one, who gets to be messy, who gets to need help. You may never say it out loud, but your patterns teach them what their job is in your presence. If their job becomes too heavy, they do not resign with a speech. They just stop showing up. Let me show you what I mean. Imagine someone who is always the strong friend. Every time you talk, you bring a crisis, a spiral, a problem you need processed. You might be open, honest, vulnerable. All good things. But vulnerability without self-regulation quietly turns the other person into a therapist. Over time they learn, when I am around you, I do work. Now here is where it gets interesting. Even if you never ask them to do that work, people will still feel assigned. Because humans are predictive machines. The brain does not wait for you to ask. It forecasts what will happen based on past patterns and starts paying the cost in advance. That is why they get tired before they even see your message. Their nervous system has already opened the tab, so you think they drifted because they got busy. But they drifted because your name on their screen became a cue for future labor. And this does not only happen with emotional labor, it happens with identity labor. Some people drift because being close to you forces them to confront who they are not. This one is subtle, and it is the one almost nobody talks about honestly because it makes you sound arrogant if you say it wrong. But I am going to say it cleanly. If you change faster than the social environment around you, you become a mirror people did not consent to. You start reading more, training, building something, getting disciplined, getting honest. Or you start healing and your tolerance for dysfunction drops. You become less available for drama, less willing to pretend. That is growth, but growth has a social side effect. It creates upward comparison pressure. There is research on social comparison theory that shows we constantly evaluate ourselves against relevant others, especially peers. Not celebrities. Peers. People in our actual circle. If you are the person who used to be like them and now you are not, it destabilizes their self-story. And the cheapest way for a mind to protect its story is distance. Notice the pattern here. They do not say, being around you triggers my inadequacy. They say, I have just been busy, or I have been going through a lot. Both can be true, but distance is doing psychological work for them. It reduces comparison. Here is the uncomfortable twist. Sometimes people do not drift away because you became worse. They drift because you became clearer. Clarity is expensive. Clarity forces decisions. When you get clearer, your standards become visible, even when you do not announce them, and visibility creates evaluation anxiety in others. Stay with me, because the next layer explains why even kind, loyal people suddenly become vague and unreachable. The second mechanism is what I call narrative incompatibility. It is not that you disagree, it is that your lives can no longer be placed inside the same story without friction. People do not bond primarily over shared values. They bond over shared reality tunnels, shared interpretations, shared excuses, shared enemies, shared definitions of what is normal. When your reality tunnel changes, you become harder to locate. Example, you stop complaining about your job and start building an exit. You stop romanticizing chaos and start prioritizing calm. You stop using sarcasm as a defense and start speaking directly. To you, this feels like maturity. To the group, it can feel like betrayal because the group's cohesion was built on a shared narrative. And here is the psychological mechanism behind it. Groups maintain stability through what is essentially social homeostasis. If everyone is at the same emotional temperature, the group feels safe. When one person changes temperature, the whole system has to either adjust or eject. Most systems choose eject quietly because adjusting requires everyone to update. Updating is effortful. Ejecting is simple. That is why drift is so common. Drift is the lowest conflict form of social homeostasis. No confrontation, no accountability, just distance. Now you might be thinking, okay, so if I grow or change, I just lose people. Is that the whole message? No, because there is a third mechanism that is even more personal, and it is usually the real reason people drift from you specifically, not from change in general. People drift when they cannot predict the emotional cost of interacting with you, not the size of the cost, the volatility. Humans can tolerate high-cost relationships when the cost is stable and meaningful. Think of a demanding friendship where you both show up for each other. That is high cost, but predictable and reciprocal. What people cannot tolerate for long is variable reinforcement, sometimes warm, sometimes cold, sometimes present, sometimes absent, inzahi, sometimes affectionate, sometimes critical, sometimes you need them, sometimes you disappear. Behavioral psychology has a name for why variable reinforcement is so powerful in gambling and social media. It keeps people checking. But in close relationships, it does something else over time. It creates hypervigilance. If they do not know which version of you they will get, being around you starts to feel like walking into weather. You might be sunny, you might be storm. So they conserve energy by minimizing exposure. This is why some of the most magnetic people also experience the most drifting. They are intense. Intensity pulls people in, But intensity without regulation makes people pay attention the way you pay attention near a fire. You do not relax, you monitor. And if you are the person who says, "People always leave," I want you to listen carefully. Sometimes people leave because you teach them that closeness equals unpredictability. That is not a moral failure. It is a nervous system pattern. But it has consequences. Now I'm going to flip the frame because this is where most videos stop and start giving you shallow advice like communicate better or find your people. That is not enough. Here is the deeper layer that connects everything I have said. People drift away as a form of self-protection from identity debt. Identity debt is what builds up when being connected to you requires them to maintain a version of themselves that is not sustainable. Let me make that concrete. If they have to be the mature one, that is identity debt. If they have to be the fun one, that is identity debt. If they have to be the successful one, that is identity debt. If they have to be the struggling one so you can feel needed, that is identity debt. If they have to stay small so you do not feel threatened, identity debt. If they have to stay on so you do not feel abandoned, identity debt. Debt accumulates quietly. Then one day the interest becomes too high, and they refinance by leaving. This is why drift feels so confusing. They did not leave after a fight. They left after 1,000 microcosts that never got named. Now here is what makes this truly interesting. You can be a wonderful person and still generate identity debt in other people. Because debt is not about cruelty. It is about role locking. And role locking is often mutual. Sometimes you lock people into roles by needing them. Sometimes by admiring them too hard. Sometimes by always being the competent one so nobody sees your need. Sometimes by being chronically agreeable so they never know where they stand. Even niceness can be role locking. Niceness can pressure other people to perform gratitude, to perform closeness, to perform being okay. Think about the last time someone drifted. Did you sense even vaguely that the relationship had a script? And did you sense that they were tired of their character in that script? If you can see that, you can change the pattern. So what do you do with this without becoming paranoid, or trying to control people, or constantly asking for reassurance? You start tracking 3 dials in every important relationship. This is the framework I want you to leave with because it explains the drift before it happens. Dial 1 is regulation. How emotionally stable is it to be around you? Not happy, stable. Can someone interact with you and feel like they can predict the emotional weather even when you are having a hard week? Dial 2 is reciprocity. Not equality, reciprocity. Does support flow both ways over time, or does one person chronically become a resource? Dial 3 is role freedom. Can the other person be multiple versions of themselves around you? Can they be messy sometimes, quiet sometimes, ambitious sometimes, uncertain sometimes, without you punishing them with withdrawal, sarcasm, disappointment, or neediness? When people drift, one of these dials is usually broken, and the trick is this. You often feel the drift first as a change in their behavior, but the cause is a change in their internal economics, their cost-benefit system rebalanced. Now watch what happens when you apply the framework. If someone is drifting, you stop chasing the surface. You stop obsessing over texts and timing and social media. You ask a better question. Which dial became too expensive for them? If it is regulation, you look at volatility. Do you dump, disappear, snap, then apologize, then repeat? If it is reciprocity, you look at extraction. Are your conversations mostly about your inner world? Do you leave space for theirs, or do you take it unconsciously? If it is role freedom, you look at subtle control. Do you only like them when they fit your preferred version of them? And I will add something that is going to sound harsh, but it is liberating if you can handle it. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is let the drift teach you what the relationship was really built on. Because some connections are not built on love, they are built on familiar roles. And when you stop playing your role, the connection evaporates. That does not mean you failed. It means you finally saw the operating system. There is one more piece I want to give you because it protects you from the other trap, blaming yourself for every drift. People also drift when they cannot extract the same psychological benefits from you anymore. If you were their audience, their validation source, their chaos partner, their backup plan, their superiority ladder, and you stop providing that function, they will fade. Not because you became unworthy, but because the relationship was instrumental. This is why understanding this topic separates you from most people. Most people take drift personally. They interpret it as a verdict on their value. But it is usually a verdict on the relationship design. And once you see relationship design, you stop begging for proximity and start building better structures. So here is the ultimate insight, the thing that ties the whole video together. People drift away from you when your presence disrupts their ability to remain coherent. Coherent means their nervous system can settle, their identity can stay stable, their story still makes sense, their role does not bankrupt them, their social standing does not feel at risk, their internal accounting does not go into the red. When your presence threatens coherence, distance restores it. That is the deeper reason, and it explains both sides. It explains why people drift from emotionally volatile people and why they drift from people who grow. It explains why they drift from controlling people and why they drift from highly honest people. Coherence is the hidden currency. Your job is not to make everyone stay. Your job is to become the kind of person whose relationships are metabolizable, regulated, reciprocal, and role-free. The people who can meet you there will not need to fade. They will just be with you. And the people who cannot, let them drift with information, not with shame. If you want a challenge, do this for the next week. When someone feels distant, do not interrogate them. Do not chase. Quietly ask yourself, what version of themselves do they have to be around me? And is that version sustainable? Because the moment you can answer that honestly, you stop being confused by fading. You start seeing the blueprint. If this changed the way you interpret people pulling back, I would love to hear what dial you recognized most in the comments. And remember this line, because it will save you years of misreading social reality. People rarely leave you as a person. They leave the cost of being close to you.